everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Art with Mr. Malik. I'm your host, Mr. Malik. Thanks for joining me. So on today's lesson with Art with Mr. Malik, we are going to go over the mystery of sketchbooks, drawing books, all of the drawing type of sketchbooks that they have at the art store or online when you order. And sometimes it can be very tricky and intimidating because you don't really know where to start or what all of the information on the sketchbook means. So I want to kind of educate you today to help you kind of break this down and determine which sketchbook works for you, because they all are designed to do something different as far as the art world is concerned. So on today's lesson, we're going over sketchbooks. Are you ready? Come and join me. So let's move some of these out of the way so we can start to go through this one by one. So first and foremost, you kind of have your basic sketchbook, right? So when you go to the store, there's going to be bunches of shelves with different sketchbooks. You always have different brands. This one is Strathmore, but you have several different brands of companies that make sketchbooks. So you really want to figure out which brand you like or experiment to see which one kind of works for you. But this is what you want to look out for, right? First of all, this is a drawing sketchbook, so it's really made for materials such as pencil, charcoal, things like that. Maybe some pen, maybe, but that's pretty much it. They tell you how many sheets of paper come in the book, so you know how many you have, and it also tells you the size. So I don't know if you can see here, but this one is 8 by 10, so it's 8 inches by 10 inches, which means that 8 inches across, going 10 inches up, is the size of the entire book. Right, and so now you know how big your piece of paper is. This is going to be an 8 by 10 size piece of paper when you finish, when you're using it. The other thing you want to pay attention to is how much weight the paper has. And now you're saying to yourself, well, Mr. Malik, what does weight and paper have to do with each other? Well, one of the things that each sketchbook is going to tell you is the weight of the paper, because the weight of the paper is going to determine how thick the paper is, so that way whatever you're drawing on your paper won't bleed through to the other side, or it won't tear and rip the paper because it's either too wet or the material just doesn't work with the paper. So the sketchbook will tell you how much weight, which is going to be the thickness of each sheet your paper has, and that's going to help you determine whether or not whatever material you're going to use, whether it's paint, pencil, pen, ink, whatever material you're going to use to draw or illustrate, it'll help you determine whether or not the paper is the right type of paper for that project. So in this case, we have an 8 by 10 book with an 80-pound paper for drawing purposes. In this particular sketchbook, this is a watercolor book, and you can see the size difference between an 8 by 10, and this one tells you that it's an 11 by 14. And again, it's 11 inches across by 14 inches going in height, okay? This one has, let's see here where we are. We have 50 sheets in this. This is a watercolor book, so this is obviously made for watercolor paint. It's hot press, which means that hot press and cold press just tells the difference between the texture of the paper. So this paper is pretty smooth, which just means that when they created the paper, they made the surface of the paper very smooth. With cold press watercolor pads, the paper would have some type of texture to it. You can kind of feel it's a little rough, which is also a different style for painting. This one's paper is pretty thick. It has 300 pounds of paper, of weight rather. I'm sorry, 140 pounds of paper, which is 300 grams per millimeter, but 140 pounds of this paper. So imagine the difference of this paper is 80 pounds versus this paper being 140 pounds. So this is almost like having a greeting card or that type of paper, something really thick, cardstock material. So that's what this is for. And when you're using this kind of paper, it totally absorbs the water and does not let the water seep to the other side and or rip the paper easily, which is why the weight and the thickness is very important for this type of paper. So this is specifically for watercolor painting. You can use it with the watercolor pencils, watercolor paint tubes, anything like that. Watercolor, you can even use it for gouache wash painting, maybe some inks, any type of wet material you pretty much can use this for. The next book in our series is called Bristol. Same size, 11 by 14. This one's a little less in weight, it's 100 pounds. You have 20 sheets made by the same company as the first book, Strathmore. I forgot to tell you this company is Fabriano, so that's again another different type of brand. And this is called Bristol paper. It is a smooth paper made for using specifically pen, ink, and markers. And so it does not allow the pen and ink to bleed through the paper because the paper is, again, thick enough in that cardstock material. So because this is for watercolor where you're going to have a wet paintbrush, this is specifically for ink and markers where it's not as wet, but it still has the wetness. So you know how when you're using a pen or a marker on a piece of computer paper, it definitely bleeds through, where bleeds through means that if you lift the paper up, it's going to be markings on the underneath paper because the ink bled through on the other paper underneath. This one is specifically designed so that does not happen. So you can draw as much as you want and whatever ink, marker material you want, and then on the next paper, it's going to still be clean. So this is what this is for, Bristol, right? So again, each sketchbook kind of is designed for a different type of medium. I even have an oil painting sketchbook. Again, we have our size. This one is 9 inches by 12 inches. Again, 9 inches across by 12 inches going up. We have a 215-pound paper. Gee, this is really thick because oil painting is very wet material, right? But with oil paint, the oil is so thick, and it takes a second to dry, so the paper is going to be wet longer than watercolor. So the paper is very, very, very thick and has a texture edge over it. So most of the time you'll see people painting oil paintings on a canvas, but for those that necessarily don't want a canvas because maybe the canvases are too big, you can have an entire sketchbook of oil paintings in an actual on paper. That's a material designed specifically to use with oil painting. And again, the same company. And sometimes it even tells you the differences of things up here. It says acid-free, heavyweight, no gesso required, meaning that you don't have to prime the paper first. You can just go right into painting on it because the paper has already been prepared for you to paint with. So this is what oil painting sketchbooks look like. I also have a sketchbook that is specifically designed for markers. Again, it tells you how many sheets, the size, the weight. This one is 60 pounds. So it's a little lighter than the ones that we've been using. So the paper is a little bit more flimsier, right? Again, it doesn't allow for a bleed through. So you can definitely do all kinds of sketches and inkings up here. I've done some color testing as well on mine to make sure that it doesn't bleed through, just again to play around with it. But the paper is very light. It's not as light as computer paper, but it's still very light for markers. And again, you can do whatever kind of designing that you want specifically with markers on this type of paper. Our next one I have here is we did drawing already. The same thing, drawing pad. So that's another one I have. This one is another marker sketchbook. It tells you at the bottom here for marker paper. So just make sure you read over it and decide and determine what type of paper it is. It's very easy to figure out. Marker paper, 50 sheets. This one is only 13.5 pounds, so it's very light. 9 inches by 12 inches is the size. So this is very light paper. Again, this one is, even though it's light, it's designed to not necessarily have any bleed throughs. So that's what this is for. But it's also designed, I'm going to tell you this also, the reason why the paper is so light is because sometimes in drawing, I don't know if you can see here, if this is going to, sometimes when you're drawing, you want the paper to be translucent, which means you can kind of see through it in the underlining image. So I have an image here, and then underneath it I have an image here, but sometimes if the paper is light enough, you can see your image because you want to be able to sketch images on top of each other for drawing purposes. So this paper is light enough to see through it, but it still won't bleed to the other side. And again, sometimes they'll have instructions on the paper, on the book as well, to tell you what is recommended for. But again, this is art. You can kind of use these things for anything. The last thing I want to show you is that if you ever notice, your computer paper actually has a size, weight, and information on it as well. So this is my multi-purpose regular computer printing paper, right? A lot of people use this to draw because it's the most convenient paper that you can probably have at home. And again, it comes in the 500 sheet pack, so you have plenty of it. But what I wanted to point out is that this does have a pound as weight, so it's 20 pounds. There's 500 sheets. This is a bright page. And this page, just like any standard printer page, is 8.5 inches by 11. So 8.5 inches going across by 11 inches going to the top. So this is a standard size for paper as far as printing computers are concerned. And so the other thing I wanted you to notice is that this paper is just regular paper. There's just, again, if anyone has ever drawn with markers or paint or try to use this type of paper, it can work, but it's just lighter. It can easily rip if the paper gets too wet. It does bleed through to the next sheet. So that's something to be conscious of when you're doing drawings or paintings or whatever. And so it's just that way you can use it properly and know which paper is going to work for you. And again, the other thing I wanted to point out is that most sketchbooks come in a standard size. You're going to have 9 by 12, 8 by 10 is another standard. So we go back to, again, 9 by 12, 9 by 12. Then your next size up is generally 11 by 14, 11 by 14. So you have standard sizes. The next standard size up is like 16 by 20. Then the next standard size up is 18 by 24. Every so often you'll have sizes that are outside of the standard ranges because some people want different sizes. But for the most part, when you go to the stores, you're going to have standard sizes in all of your paper sizes in all of your sketchbooks. And that's what we work with. Again, just like computer paper, we have standard sizes in every sketchbook as well. And then you also have, the last one I'm going to show you is customized sketchbooks that come in different sizes that you can buy from wherever if you want something specifically designed for yourself. This is a smaller sketchbook. That was a handmade personal sketchbook. So again, the paper weight is thick enough that you can use it for multi-purposes. Multimedia means that I can use pencil, pen, markers, paint, and it'll all still work well. So that's what this type of sketchbook is designed for, especially if you're somebody who makes it, they're aware of the materials that you can use in this type of sketchbook. So, I hope this was educational for you, and I hope you guys can go out and find your own sketchbook adventures and have fun illustrating and drawing, and painting, of course, and doing whatever artwork you can. So I would love to see what kind of artwork you can come up with using your sketchbooks, or just maybe see a video of your sketchbooks. So thank you for joining me. This is our lesson for today, and I will see you next time on Art with Mr. Malik. Thanks for stopping by.